It's painfully obvious that our culture is nurturing us and our kids into a consumer mentality of get, get, get. That message is everywhere, but the gospel is one that tells us to respond to the grace we've been shown and given with a lifestyle of give, give, give. What does this mean for youth ministry and how we do discipleship? My friend Dave Coryell recently wrote a book built around a metaphor involving hippos and honeybees that can help us shift our youth ministries to better reflect gospel priorities. Stay tuned as I chat with Dave Coryell and Josh Good about this much-needed youth ministry shift on this episode of Youth Culture Matters.
From the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, this is Youth Culture Matters. If you're a parent, youth worker, educator, counselor, grandparent, or anyone else who cares about kids, we're glad you've joined us for this practical, informative, and hope-filled podcast. This is a place where together we talk and think Christianly about the rapidly changing world of today's children, teens, and young adults.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Youth Culture Matters. I'm Walt Mueller here at the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, and our studio today is crowded. We usually do our interviews with folks by Zoom, but today, since we're interviewing a couple of guys that we know pretty well and who are local, we had them come in. They volunteered to come in. So hopefully it's not going to get too hot as we're in here talking to our friends Dave Coryell and Josh Good. And these guys are here because they work with an organization called CE. I'm not going to tell you what that means. I'm going to let them explain that in a little bit. And Dave actually has, they're doing great work, by the way, which we're excited to let you know about. But Dave actually has a brand new book. And I know some of you who our listeners have read this because I never finished what I was going to say. Our friend Chris Trent, who's down in Georgia leading the Georgia Baptist group of youth workers down there, sent me a text the other day, and it was a picture of his hand holding this book. And he said, have you read this? And I was afraid to say, like, yes or no, because I didn't know what he was going to say about it because I hadn't read it yet. Right. And I said, no, not yet, but we're having these guys on a podcast next week. And he said, it's really good. So that's first I'm telling you that, Dave. So
all right,
we're gonna talk about this book, Less Like Hippos, More Like Honeybees. We'll get to that in a little bit, but as we like to do when we have folks on the podcast, get to know them a little bit. So I asked Chris Wagner, because I'm not being very creative today, I said, Chris, what's a good question we can ask these guys to get them, to get to know each other a little bit? Chris doesn't have a mic today, but we may go to him. Chris, you want to pull the mic over and just tell us what the question is? These are fun, asking these questions when you're with your students.
Okay.
What a great way to get to know them. So
we should be releasing this episode about a week before Christmas, so I was trying to think of a Christmas-related thing. So thinking about childhood Christmas gifts, the thing that came to mind is, like, what is that one childhood Christmas gift that you really, really wanted? It was number one on your wish list, but whether later Christmas Day or 2 days later or 2 weeks later, it was really ended up being a disappointment. It was kind of that, like, first time you realized as a kid that the gift didn't match up to what you hoped it would be. Yeah.
Okay, you switched the question up a little bit there, which is okay because I can answer that. I mean, that's just about every gift, right? We get that after a day we realize it's not redemptive and it doesn't fill us like Jesus does. I mean, that's basically what it is. But we'll ask that question. But you asked also, what gift was the biggest disappointment? Like when you're sitting there opening gifts and it's something from your grandparents and you've got to act like it was great and it wasn't, and your stomach just fell. And then also we said, what was the best Christmas gift ever when you were a kid? Is that okay for me to adjust your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're the boss.
Right. Well, and I like to correct you publicly because it just makes me feel better about myself, actually. You worded it a little bit differently, and it threw me off there. But I like that question, too, because I think that really gets into the whole consumerism thing. We're going to talk about that with this book as well. So let's start
Walt,
with...
Before you go any further, I just wanted to look over at Josh and say, I'm so glad we're in the room because we can just feel the love that is here.
The positivity and encouragement.
It is incredible.
Yeah, I wish I felt it. I don't know where it's coming from, but no, that's good. That's good. We are so glad you guys are here. But let me start with Josh first, because we're going to go to Dave, talk about the book. Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then the question. Yeah, give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah. Thanks, Walt. Well, I have 4 kids at home, and the oldest 2 are Gen Alpha, and so my house is like just being invaded by all the awesome language that my kids say I'm not allowed to use, like skibbity and that 8 and all those sort of things. I try to use those words as much as possible.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of years as a youth pastor, and before coming on staff with Christian Endeavor. And
that's CE. There it is, Christian Endeavor. That's good. That's good.
Was that too soon?
No. That was good. Yeah.
And I'm excited to answer this question because I think I have an answer in mind.
Okay.
Because we switched up the question a little bit, I'll switch up my answer. As a youth pastor, we did a Christmas party every year. And one year I received as a gift the leg of a mannequin. And that was like, even in receiving it, I didn't know what to think. And I was like joyfully thankful and like, man, what is my wife going to think when I bring a whole leg from a mannequin?
Yeah.
The
So
house?
the first question is, who gave that to you?
It was a student. I didn't ask
Yeah.
how they sourced it. But
Yeah. That's awesome. Did you turn it into a lamp?
no, I should have.
Yeah.
No, it became one of those recurring gifts that we repackaged it every year and gave it again.
Yeah. That's awesome. Little trivia here. Someone asked me, I was talking to someone the other day, a parent of a college student who's coming back here to Lancaster from school for, over the Christmas break. And she was saying he's got to get a job. What parent doesn't say that, right? And I said, well, I did this when I was in college, and one of the jobs, I went to a temporary agency. It was called Manpower, I think, outside of Philadelphia. And one of the jobs I had was for 2 days. The Montgomery Mall was getting ready to open, so anybody from Montgomery County knows the Montgomery Mall. And for 2 days, I worked in the mall assembling female mannequins.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. So that's good. That's good. I like that. Was there a gift that was really disappointing to you when you were a kid?
No, I'm just perpetually positive and thankful.
Okay.
So.
Thanks. You're setting it up for people to see me for who I really am now. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go, before I go to Dave, I want to go over to Chris and pass the mic over. We only have 3 mics in here, so we're.
Yeah, so I wasn't prepared. You asked me to come up with a question. That doesn't mean I have to answer it, right?
Yeah.
I when I did come up with this question, I didn't necessarily have an answer in mind. I will say two things that come to mind. One is one that I was disappointed with is one year I got a printer for Christmas. And I had been asked back in April, which is when my birthday is, if I wanted and or needed a printer. And at the time in April, I said no. December, I still did not need or want a printer.
It was in the closet.
It was the exact same printer that somebody had already purchased for me back in April.
Yeah.
And they decided, well, maybe he'll have forgotten that he didn't want this back in April. So anyways, that was a disappointment for sure.
Was that your parents?
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm not going to say no.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I remember being disappointed as a kid, that big disappointment, is I had it was sort of my first pair of like name brand shoes. They were Reebok pumps, if you remember.
Oh yeah,
Reebok pumps. And as a little kid, you think I'm going to be able to dunk a basketball.
Yeah.
I'm going to be so cool in these sneakers. They were like the worst pair of shoes.
Nothing.
I refused to buy Reebok ever since.
Yeah.
It was a big disappointment. I wanted to like those things so much.
Yeah.
Have fun pumping them up. Nope. No. Still to this, I still haven't dunked a basketball. I haven't figured that one out either.
Yeah. Okay.
Lower the rim.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. We were talking about that when I could never dunk a basketball. I had friends in high school who could, and I could touch the rim, but that was it. And there is no way I could even get close to a rim now. I've actually tried some solo jumping when no one is around, and it's just depressing. Depressing at my age. Dave Coryell.
Oh man, it's over to me.
Yeah.
So
pressure's on.
The pressure is on, and I want to say the worst Christmas gift. I remember one year you hit that age where you're kind of no longer a young child and you're starting to just kind of move into that next stage. And it was that Christmas that all the packages were clothes.
Yeah.
And I just,
that is disappointing.
oh man. Yeah. And I just always loved either, a basketball, a soccer ball, something, video games. Give me something fun. And it was all clothes, and I hadn't quite hit that stage of caring about fashion. Yeah. And so that was the discouraging Christmas for me.
By the way, when are you going to hit that stage?
Yeah, they're still working on me.
Okay,
still working on me. But I've got my.
Yes, you do. I like that shirt.
Yeah. We're supporting. In fact,
Philadelphia Eagles shirt.
Philadelphia Eagles. In fact, that's the Christmas I remember is the most recent one because last year for Christmas I was given a Nakobe Dean jersey. The Philadelphia Eagles, and everyone was saying, "Oh, he's a bust. He's not going to be great." And this year, he has been a stud.
Oh yeah, he's been great.
So he's my guy out there. He has my favorite number 17. And so anyway, so they got that for me. So yeah, so that's Christmas.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I'm gonna just echo worst gift. Anything clothing related. As a kid back in the '60s, that was devastating and. I sort of remember this. I think this happened, that my mom would always warn me, when you open your gift from your grandparents, act like you're surprised and it's great. That's why it was always clothing. Yeah. So, one year they got us, and I have the picture, they got us all matching Christmas pajamas. And so we have pictures of that. Difficult to look at.
I was going to say, were they nice pajamas?
They were, white on the top, red on the bottom, with white or red snowflakes on top, white snowflakes on bottom.
They had the feet attached to them, though,
no, there
right?
were no feet.
Oh, come on, no footies. Yeah. Oh, man, those were back in the day. I love
seeing little kids, my grandkids in those, but I imagine if I had to sleep in one of those, I'd feel like I was in prison. They just does not, it's not appealing to me. Best gift, I would say, that I remember was an HO race car set, and you know what? It's still in my attic. And now that we're talking about it, I might go up there today and get it down to see if I can get it to work.
You should.
And it'll probably be just majorly disappointing that it doesn't work. So,
but there'll be great memories.
We'll see about that. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's good. Yeah. So with Christmas coming up, it's fun to ask these questions. And, if you're a younger person, ask your parents this question, and it'd be fun to hear their answer. So, Dave, talk a little bit about yourself first. I want people to get to know you. I know you a bit. And I've known you for, 31, 32, well, probably 34 years, I'm thinking now. Because we first met, I was speaking at a youth worker event at a camp in the Poconos, a Methodist camp, Pocono Plateau. Mm-hmm. Let's see if I get all this right, all right?
Yeah.
And I remember you sitting there. You were at a Methodist church in Columbia, Pennsylvania.
I was.
At the time.
Yeah.
Before you came up to E-Town here to work here.
Uh-huh.
Which is before your work with CE. But tell us a little bit about yourself and then your history and then what you're doing now. Because I want people to be aware of the history of CE and what CE is doing now. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, married to Jen for 30 years, and we've got 4 young adult kids at this point. Our youngest just turned 20 this fall, and it's like, wait, no more teenagers in the Coryell household. But yeah, that's a little bit of our family. And I served as a youth worker or leadership development pastor in the local church for 15 years. And then after that, made a segue into serving with Christian Endeavor. Now, Christian Endeavor is the grandfather of local church youth ministry. And many people today haven't even heard about Christian Endeavor. They don't know what it's all about. But it's actually been around since 1881.
That's amazing.
So So it predates a lot of things, and that is really helpful when you're trying to have a foundation in youth ministry that isn't built on just a lot of fluff or personality. And so that's we'll get more into that later on.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why Josh Good is in the room here, Josh and I met when I was teaching a seminary class, master's level class, and we connected through that time. And I shared with him about Christian Endeavor, and he was actually the first youth pastor to start Christian Endeavor in our rebirth mode, which goes back 12 years now. And so 12 years ago, we rebirthed here in the United States with CE. It's now grown out. You can find churches across our country, 25 states, to date, where you can find somebody that knows about Christian Endeavor and is using it as the foundation of how they impact teenagers and young adults. And it's also grown into 56 countries. Now, back in the day, it was in a lot more than that, but it had shrunk over time. And dating back about 8 years, you could find it in 29 different countries. And by God's grace, it's expanded. And yeah, you can find people on. I've been to 6 continents and spoken in 50 different countries, and just encouraging youth workers, pastors, just people that are trying to have a solid foundation to take young people deeper, but then also turn ministry over to them and unleash them to do ministry as opposed to having it all done for them.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit.
You were saying before we started to record that after the first of the year, you're going to India to work with the CE churches, the churches that are using CE there. How many churches did you say are using CE there? Or?
Well, just in India, there's 1,500.
That's amazing.
Yeah. On that trip, I'll be in Nepal and Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
And in Nepal, you can find over 50, and that doesn't sound like that many, but carving out some churches in a country that is so opposed to Christianity is huge. And then in just the last few years, Christian Endeavor has been used as a tool in Lahore, Pakistan, and that's it's just an act of God. You go into these places and see the need and the hunger for help in the area of youth ministry.
So, in our world today, we are so saturated by marketing, and we bow to the idol of relevance. And anything that was from yesterday, almost literally now, is seen as so yesterday. I picked up a book the other day. Duffy and I are getting ready for our Doctor of Ministry deal, and a new cohort starting in May up at Gordon Conwell, and we're working on the syllabus to get our registered students reading. And I picked this book up, and I immediately thought, well, this would be great, but when was this written? And I had read it, and it was 2009, and immediately I'm thinking that's irrelevant. I looked at another one; it was 2019, and we've been so conditioned to think that's irrelevant, but that's not true. That's not true. We have been manipulated into believing that, and I would think that when you start to talk about CE and you mention when it came into being, or for people who maybe, I think it was Mark Center's book, right? He has a history of youth ministry, and he talks about Christian Endeavor in there, that people who read that might think, oh, that was the old days. That was the old people. We don't do anything like that anymore. That can't be relevant at all. But I'm curious, we're going to talk about the relevance of it now and the way that it works as a philosophy of ministry and an approach to ministry. But what was it in the beginning? What was and I'm not asking you to repeat like a memorized mission statement if you don't know that, but I mean, you would know, kind of like when it landed, when it launched and it was brand new, what were people in churches hearing that this thing was?
Well, the beautiful thing is if we go back to when this did start, when Christian Endeavor did start, it's 1881.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a time that churches were not booming. Sometimes people think, oh, well, back then everyone went to church.
Yeah.
People were not excited about church. They weren't full churches. But there's this young guy named Francis Clark. He graduates from seminary. He's 25 years old, and he gets assigned to this church in Maine. And they had this time that they gathered the people together every year, and they had times each evening that they worshiped and prayed together. They called it their prayer week. During that prayer week, they saw dozens of young people, teenagers and young adults, come to Christ for the first time in their life. On Sunday, the pastor gets up in the pulpit and he looks out at his church. He sees all of these young people and his heart broke. And the reason his heart broke, because he realized they had nothing to help these young people grow in fellowship with each other or do anything meaningful for Christ and the church. And that's where the model for Christ and the church came for Christian Endeavor. So what he did was he took his Bible and he went into a closet, literally closed the door, and just prayed, God, would you give me something? And he emerged from that closet with 4 ideas. We call them the 4 dimensions of youth ministry today: up, in, with, and out. And, we're not here to talk about all that today, but we still use those to this day as we're training youth workers to help young people have a way of approaching life.
Yeah. Explain, like in a sentence, each of those: up, in,
with and out.
And out, yeah.
So up, you think about your relationship with God, but it goes deeper than that. That everywhere you go, your life is to be a confession of Christ. And so if you approach your life like that, you're building your relationship with God so that you can confess about who Jesus is through your life. That is the up. The in is the actual local church, because God designed us not to go through life all on our own or be spiritual hermits all by ourselves, but to go through that in community. And so that's the importance of the local church. So up, in, with, that connects with the idea that the body of Christ is not just our local church. It's not just a denomination. It's so much bigger than that. We all get the opportunity to invest a little bit and make a little bit of a difference in the midst of this huge movement that God has. But we need to design what we do to do ministry with, not just when it's convenient, not just when we don't have enough money to do it on our own, so we have to find another church to partner with, but actually making it part of our DNA that we're going to structure ministry that is bigger than us. And so that's the with. And then the out is that there's people in the world that don't know Jesus in their life, and we want them to know the greatest hope that we all have. And so we do that together. So up, in, with, out.
So has that stayed true since then? And Josh, when you jumped in, is that the basic foundation of what you started to do in your local church youth ministry, switching, I'm assuming, switching things up?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was the idea of how can I activate students deeply, and how can we do that with purpose and with focus? So not just running the programs that I had been running. I really came, before connecting with Dave and Christian Endeavor, came to like a come to Jesus moment in ministry where I'd grown the doubled the size of the youth ministry, planned the best Bible lessons and the best games, out there, and I was pretty excited and passionate, but then recognized, man, is that all that work that I've done, has that helped students to be living out their faith boldly every day, regardless of where they're at? And I had to say, no, that model of ministry, by some measures, it's successful, but wasn't resulting in the lasting faith that I want to see in students. And so, as Dave started sharing these ideas of 4-dimensional youth ministry, the purpose in everything that we do, unleashing students, man, I got so excited.
Yeah, and it seems to me when that happens, I had a conversation with a guy this morning, and how, even at my age, you're constantly, you're learning, because you realize the older you get, you realize how much you don't know. It's humbling. Right. And so we were talking about that, and I actually got talking about kind of like what I just heard you say. These were the things we used to do, or I was doing, and the tendency there is to have a higher view of yourself and your abilities than is actually real, and you're trusting more in yourself than in God. This is what I understood.
Yep.
And then experiencing, it sounds to me like it was a humbling moment for you to do this.
Incredibly humbling.
And what changed? Not in you, but in your students. What changed?
I think as I became willing to step out of the center, like as the youth worker, my job wasn't to be the focus, but to help students grow in their giftings.
Yeah.
Man, that's when students said, finally, I'm ready. And now I have an opportunity to discover the spiritual giftings God has given me and to grow into them.
Yeah. I think we're going to take a break here, but I just want to mention, I talked to this guy I was talking about this morning about the book Faith for Exiles. I bring that up all the time, Mark Matlock and David Kinnaman, which I loved that book. Yeah. And what I loved about that was that they looked at, output, the output of our ministries, you ministering, Dave ministering, me ministering, Chris is working in his church. So what happens to those kids when they graduate? They're 18 to 29 years old, and only 10%, I've said this before, are resilient disciples. And so that's where I think we have to step back and go, oh, you know what? If I had 100% of those kids coming, and that was my measure of success, and that number of 100% was growing, and only 10% are walking with the Lord right now and serving Christ in meaningful ways and, growing in their faith, boy, I've got to sit back and go, something's not right. Now, we know salvation is of the Lord, right? Yep. And it's the Holy Spirit that brings the growth. But, yeah. Did you want to say something, Dave? You looked like you perked up there for a minute.
Well, just if you had the opportunity as a youth worker to flip the script.
Yeah.
And instead of having 10% engaged, but you could have 90% engaged.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to actively study what you're doing and make an adjustment?
Yeah. Right.
And that's the question, because we can talk in the next two segments about what it is that can help you do that. But it's like blind Bartimaeus on the road when Jesus walked by him. He didn't say, "Oh, here's what you need to do." He said, "What is it that I can do for you?" And he allowed him to respond. And so if we're at a place where we are ready and we just want some insight to do that, it's out there, but it's going to require us to say, wow, maybe I need to make some adjustments.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, having been around the block a few times over the course of my youth ministry life, and having lived some of what you're saying early on, and then seeing, what's happening in the world of youth ministry, I know that this is something, this whole philosophy, and what you're driving at in terms of how to define success. Church boards need to hear this, because the basing everything on the metrics and not caring. I mean, because, and I'll stereotype here, but basing everything on the metrics and then, releasing kids and not really following up and not realizing that 90% are walking away at some level. That's an issue. Maybe we have and we're pressuring youth workers into the wrong metrics, and many youth workers are believing that those are the metrics, because that's what's great to post on Instagram. Those are the pictures, standing in front, under the lights, in the fog, literally and perhaps figuratively in the fog, with a room full of kids, and Well, we're going to take a break. We're talking to my friends Dave Coryell and Josh Good from Christian Endeavor, and when we get back, we're going to hear more about the resources they have, including this new book, Less Like Hippos, More Like Honeybees. We'll be right back. We're excited to announce and invite all of our youth worker friends to join us for the 3rd Annual Northeast Youth Ministry Summit, to be held March 17 to 20 of 2025 in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. This is a lively gathering of rookie youth workers, seasoned youth ministry veterans, paid and volunteer, who come together to be equipped for ministry while connecting in rich community in the beautiful Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. While held in the Northeast, the summit is open to everyone. Last year, youth workers ranging in age from 19 to 77 came from 21 different states and 3 countries. This year's theme is Changing World, Unchanging Word. You will receive top-notch training from seasoned youth ministry trainers and experts on how to teach the Bible, how to understand and respond biblically to cultural influences, and how to practically and effectively minister in a world full of emerging challenges and choices. To learn more, see the speakers, browse the full schedule, and to register, visit nymsummit.org. That's nymsummit.org. I hope to see you at the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit in March. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Youth Culture Matters. Again, I'm Walt Mueller here at CPYU. I want to mention, number one, thanks for listening. And I know many of you have heard about the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit, which is coming up, which we're sponsoring along with Reformed Youth Ministries. It's March 17 to 20 in Ligonier, Pennsylvania, and CE will be represented there. So if you're coming and you're joining us, you can learn about CE. Josh is actually working with, and I didn't mention this, he's working with us as one of our CPYU research fellows.
Right. Yep.
Which I don't know. When you flash the card around, are people impressed or that you're? Oh, that we got to get you a card, I guess.
Yep. I'm still waiting on my card.
Yeah, but you're going to actually teach a breakout seminar.
That's right.
Do you want to give a little preview of that? You're going to work with Kyle Folks on that, or I know you guys are working on it now.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, we're just incredibly excited, and I'm just so thankful to be working with other research fellows. I mean, it's just this high-level group of, man, I try to keep up.
They're all great. They're all great.
Yep. And I think some of the text threads that we have are just also equally as ridiculous. But just a joy to kind of dig into youth ministry culture with a group of people who love the Lord and love students. And, yeah, Kyle and I are going to be doing a breakout on intergenerational ministry and some practical ways that we can think about helping people of different generations in a local church family rub shoulders and doing that together.
And that's so important for our students. And unfortunately, this is one of the trends I've seen. I've been, again, around long enough. I say this all the time, to have seen a real shift, like in the late 70s when I got started and then through the 80s, where we responded with good intentions. Churches responded with good intentions,
Absolutely.
Saying, well, the kids aren't engaged in worship or the kids don't like being with the older people, so let's separate them out. And when I say good intentions, it was to separate them out so that we could do ministry with them and keep them from falling back, but the intention was get them to move forward. And we're seeing now that good intentions don't lead to great results, and it's not biblical. I mean, that's the thing. And so I'm excited you guys are going to jump in and do that. So it's good, Josh. You're going to be a part of that. I'm glad you're here. And by the way, folks can check out at the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit at nymsummit.org. You can see the full lineup of those who are speaking there. There'll be some people in the lineup who you're familiar with and some faces who you're unfamiliar with. But I want to tell you, we've vetted them all, and we know that they've got expertise in the area they're going to speak to. The other thing is I want to say, these are people who, we value this here. There's teachability and there's humility. And all of us who will be speaking there or leading there, we hold on to that tightly ourselves. We're always wanting to learn. That's one of the beautiful things about coming to this thing is the community that takes place, and I learn from everybody who's there. So it's an awesome thing. So nymsummit.org.
Well, I was just glad that you allowed a picture of me and my beard to be part of that promo stuff.
Well, we had to you're back pretty far from the frame in the camera to get that thing.
I was going to say, I'm surprised that his beard fit in the picture.
Yeah, I know. Well, let me see here.
I don't think it did.
It's not all in
no,
there.
It's
down.
Yeah.
It's down on Tom Yarborough's head in the frame underneath.
That's because it's 13 inches long.
Is that what it is now?
It is.
You can.
Yeah.
Do you measure it regularly, or?
Oh, I don't have any hair on the top of my head. So, got to have successful metrics somehow. Right?
Yeah. Are you trying? Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing. I joke with you about it all the time. If you would just shave that mustache, you would be an Amish
100%
guy.
Amish.
You would be 100% Amish in this community. So. Yeah, people will be excited. Oh, we have an Amish speaker. We should have gotten your photo taken like that with your straw hat on. But yeah. Anyway, we're glad you're going to be there. So let's talk about CE. Dave, why don't you tell us about how CE is resourcing churches now, and then I'm going to get into this brand new, newly released book, Less Like Hippos, More Like Honeybees.
Yeah. So the answer to that question depends on which part of the world that you're in, because we actually have two different strategies that we use for that. There's some countries in the world that the pastors are all volunteers. And so there's other parts, like just got back from Ghana not that long ago, and all of the pastors on their circuit, they get a $7 a month stipend. So obviously in those parts of the world, you're not rolling out resources that have a cost to them.
Well, by the way, that's more than we pay Chris here, so $7 a month. But that's Chris, don't get jealous.
Yeah,
he's going to move to Ghana now. But man, that is something. $7 a month.
Yeah. So obviously they work other jobs, and they do their work with the church as well. But in the United States context, which is slowly the model that we use here in the U.S., is being picked up in other parts of the world. We use a different model, and I'm going to allow Josh to speak to this a little bit more than me right now. So I'm going to kick it over to Josh.
Before you start, Josh, let me just to clarify.
Yeah.
You guys, you're donor supported?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. And I want people to hear that, because being able to provide resources to people who don't have the means to actually pay for those things. And the reality is it costs those of us who run 501c3 charitable ministries, donor-supported ministries, a lot of money and a lot of time to produce those resources. So
yeah, and what Josh is going to explain is that in the U.S. context, just within the last few years, kind of during COVID, we were pivoting on this, developing our process so that way there is a small cost, and it's a reasonable cost, and it's less than what people, quote unquote, should be paying for it. But because we are donor supported, we offer it at less. But we actually made that pivot here, not so that we would have a revenue stream. We did it because we had more than one voice speak into our ministry from different people that were experienced in ministry circles. And they said, you need to charge. Yeah. Because in our context here in the United States, if it doesn't cost something, then that means it doesn't have a value. And so we wrestled with that, because Christian Endeavor was always 100% free.
Yeah.
And so that's a pivot that we made. But I'd like Josh to speak a little bit to what we pivoted to, because I think it's a pretty exciting model that's available.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is we're helping churches embrace a framework or a concept, a philosophical framework of youth ministry, activating students to be less like hippos, more like honeybees, which we'll talk about. Pretty simple conceptually. Like, we want students to be activated and to get after the things that God is calling them to, but making that strategic pivot in a church setting often takes some coaching, some training, some additional resourcing. And so that's really where Christian Endeavor comes in, saying we want to walk with a church to provide you the training, the coaching, the resourcing to help you strategically shift in the way you do youth ministry.
So how then, like, what exactly would you provide then for that? And obviously, I know you have a website, which we want to tell people about. By the way, Chris will we say this all the time, anything you mention, we'll put a link to it beneath the player at cpyu.org for this particular episode of the podcast. But I know people can go to the website and learn about that, but can you highlight just some of how that would work out?
Sure. So we have 3 different levels of, we call them Christian Endeavor membership. And it's basically just increasing levels of resources and coaching that a church would have access to. So level 1 is free. We do a kind of an introductory consultation with a church and kind of get them on the road toward intentional discipleship.
So it's customized one-on-one then?
It is. It is. Yeah, because we believe that, again, our metaphor, our strategy, philosophy of ministry is pretty accessible, but looking at a specific church setting, we want to tailor everything we do to help that church succeed.
That's great. Yeah, it's not like, hey, here it is, plug and play. We're going to recognize you've got differences, and there's things you do well, maybe things you don't do well, and you're customizing it to that. So there's a lot of listening on your part.
I just met with a youth worker this morning at 6 a.m. He's bivocational, so we had to meet before work, laying out some of the Christian Endeavor strategy. But a thing that came to light was he needs some tools of how to intentionally build relationship with students. And so that's not something that we necessarily highlight with everybody, but this is a need for that youth worker.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. What are the next? So that was, you said one level, right? That was one level. What were the other things?
Our first tier is free, and so we do that introductory coaching. Second tier, we do quarterly coaching, and third tier, it's monthly or as needed.
Wow, so you guys are hopping on Zoom calls and sitting
all
in
the
restaurants constantly. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you'd add to that, Dave, on that?
Well, kind of what we're set up with right now. Josh has been doing a lot of the U.S.-based coaching, and I'm doing a lot more of the international coaching. And sometimes they crisscross because I've been involved with youth ministry long enough that there's people that reach out that I know, and then we connect, and so then sometimes I'm kicking them over to Josh, and we just make it work.
It's so fun.
Yeah, it is.
And I like how you say it's so fun, because, Josh, I've watched you for years, and I know you enjoy what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get great joy out of it.
Right.
And Dave's always smiling. I don't know if you noticed that. He's always smiling. So he always enjoys everything.
Yep.
So I thought of that before we came in, and I said, Dave's going to come in here and smile.
That's what happened.
I got to learn how to smile like that, because my countenance is not like that. My wife the other night goes, "Why are you scowling?" I said, "All I'm doing is being me." I look in the mirror and I'm going, "Oh Lord, heal this." My face is not saying what's going on in my head. All right, so let's transition over to the book.
Okay.
Talk about the book.
Well,
The title. Let's start with the title, because I know you guys are traveling around. You're speaking about this. You're talking to students about it.
Yep.
When you're up front on retreats.
That's right.
Sure. Well, less like hippos, more like honeybees. The metaphor, as I unpack it there, a hippo, it actually goes into the water for 18 hours every day, and then comes out and eats nonstop for those other 6 hours. It just comes out and it eats vegetation. So it eats anywhere on an average of 80, but up to 110 pounds of vegetation every single day. So that's like it ingesting one of your junior hires. I mean, now watch where your brain goes with that. But anyway,
I have one in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but they're consumers. Their jaw opens so big. I mean, we've all seen the big mouth of a hippo, whether at the zoo or a picture or whatever. And so we think about them as this consumer. They eat and they eat and they eat. And so on the one side of this metaphor, you've got hippos. And in our churches, so often we are treating young people like a hippopotamus, like a consumer. We create programs for them. We take care of all of the details. And then we just ask them to show up, sit down and eat some pizza. We give them good stuff. I mean, we have great intentions. We try to teach them from the Bible. We try to do encouraging things with that. But at the end of the day, if we aren't activating them at all, if they just eat and eat and eat and eat, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so on the one side of the metaphor, that's the hippos. And so
well, let me say something about that, because you mentioned like some of what we do that's just consumeristic. And I know you guys well enough. You would not say those things are bad.
Oh no.
You would say it's imbalanced, but those things are necessary.
Yep.
But we're not, and well intentioned again. But I like where you're going with this, because if all you're doing all day is eating, what's going to be the output?
Yeah. So
on the other end, right? I mean,
That's
sorry. I don't know if you included that in the book, but you might want to rewrite it.
No. So
or maybe not.
So it's interesting in the book. There's one part where it talks about how we treat young people as territorial. Yeah, and one of the things the hippos do, they actually mark their territory. They have a way of swinging their tail around really fast like a fan as they defecate.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I knew we'd get
so,
there.
So,
Yeah.
there's for you. But no, on the discipleship end, if 98% or more of what we do is passive, then we've missed the boat. Of course, we need to take young people into God's Word. Absolutely. We need to teach them how to do that and teach them how to drink at the well of God's Word.
It's foundational.
Absolutely foundational. But if all they do is they come and they sit, it's not connecting with who they are as young people. And this is developmentally across time. This has been the case. But you can make an argument that it is even more so in that situation today than what it has been in the past. I was sitting down, I was having breakfast with a guy, as some people might know the name Tim Elmore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting down, I was having breakfast with him at a conference. And during that time, Tim shared that 70% of young people at a minimum are desiring for their future to be an entrepreneur running their own thing. And that is where their heart is now. And what's interesting is it's believed like 10% of the teens in our churches have already launched either a small business selling something or some kind of nonprofit because they've grabbed a hold of some idea. But they're coming into our youth ministries and everything is already done for them. And so their heart is going, I want to do things. I want to do something meaningful. And they're just told to show up and plug in.
Sit in a row and watch.
Right.
This is where you know where I'm going with this, Chris, with my soapbox. I always bring it up. Josh, I don't know if you ever heard me talk about this,
I'm
but
excited.
I hate, and this is my traditionalism as well, but it's rooted in this as well, that we call the front the stage. Because it's performance then, right? And then we line up, and somebody just took us to here at the American Music Theater, we went to see the Christmas show. I don't know if you guys have gone to see that, and we went because we knew one of the gals who's a dancer in it, and it was awesome to watch. I mean, just to see how talented she is. It was very well done, which I never suspected. I would walk away from that going, man, this was awesome, because it's usually older people, you see lining up to go in there. But it was great. But, they were performing. We were watching. And we had no role other than to pay to be there, put our rear ends in the seats and watch. And then when it was over, we left and we had a memory. Yeah. But that's performance. And I think in a lot of our youth ministries, I think we even set up our youth rooms like that, right? Like I've seen pictures online of youth rooms where there's 15 seats and there's a stage with lights that the youth pastor will get up and go, light? Okay, I'll stop. But that, you know what I'm saying there. But that's kind of like what you're saying is resonating with me, Dave, because, what you're saying is true. Yeah, that's not. There's a place for it, obviously, but that's not everything.
Yeah, and we continue doing what we've always done because it's what we've always done. But something happened during COVID when the pandemic was going on, and we just had a total ramping up of people reaching out to us and asking for the insight of what it is that Christian Endeavor provides, because all of a sudden people had to stare at the fact that their program wasn't getting it done.
Yeah.
Their personality wasn't able to get it done. Their budgets didn't get it done, and their facilities didn't get it done. And those were the things that many churches propped up their youth ministry on. A fifth one would maybe be curriculum.
Yeah.
Saying if we have this incredible curriculum, then
So all those foundational bricks were removed.
Yeah, and they're going, what do we have left? And they realized they didn't have a foundation. Yeah. And so we had so many people reaching out to us, and it has continued during this season that people are going, it's time for something more. We need a foundation that is built on something that's not just personality or money or facility driven.
It's like getting smacked and now your eyes are open and you see.
Yeah. And so that leads us to more like Honeybees.
Yeah.
And so the concept behind this is that Honeybees are creative. I mean, they are working all the time, and they're working in sync. So they're working in a collaborative nature. And what is awesome from a youth culture standpoint is that this generation that is coming up, they have an ability to collaborate that puts us to shame as older adults. I mean, they are wired to work together. They want to work together on things, and they can create in an incredible way. The other piece of a honeybee, and this is something I learned. There's a guy, I give a shout out to Colin Piper, who is he's one of these global youthman hero guys. So many people in the U.S. may not know him, but he's from Scotland. And I was at an event with Colin, and we got talking about honeybees because of writing this book. And I learned he actually keeps bees. And I was like, get out of here. And I was like, well, tell me some things about this. And he's like, wow, it's always interesting when a hive gets really ornery and you know, they're just mean. And you have to go through the process of requeening. And I was like, Colin, what the heck is that? Yeah. And he's like, oh, well, you can actually replace the queen and put in a new queen. And then the whole hive will take on the characteristics of their new queen, of their leader. And I'm like, well,
so you're advocating for firing youth pastors now?
No, not going there. Not going there.
No, steer me back. Steer me back.
No, your jobs are safe in my book. But no, the idea is that we want to guide young people to follow our leader, follow our King, follow Jesus Christ. And so, if we treat young people as those that can take on the characteristics of Christ and work collaboratively in this creative method so that they can go into the world and actually help people know about Christ. Yeah. And that is what the kingdom is supposed to look like, the body of Christ, as we go and we make that impact. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help churches make this pivot. And I say churches, but we've had parents and grandparents reaching out to us and saying that the contents of this book is changing homes. And so by God's grace, he can use it however he wants. But it was written for anyone touching the lives of those teenagers and young adults to recognize that we can treat them less like a consumer, and we can pivot and recognize that they have incredible gifts and incredible abilities to be unleashed today. And so we use this phrase, instead of being a hippo factory, be an incubator of impact. Mm-hmm. And that's what our churches should be. That's what our homes should be. Yeah. And
Christian nurture. That's what parenting's all about. Christian parenting. So
yeah. So that's kind of the Spark Notes version.
Good. All right. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want you to give us some very practical things that are, give us a preview of what's in the book and a little bit of how, we can make that happen. So talking to Josh Good, Dave Coryell from CE, Christian Endeavor. We'll be right back.
If you enjoy listening to Youth Culture Matters and would like to support the ongoing efforts of this ministry, you can do so by visiting cpyu.org/giving to make a donation. Your prayers and financial support make this podcast possible.
So as we finish up this conversation, this last segment with Dave Coryell and with Josh Good from CE, Christian Endeavor, talking about this book, Less Like Hippos, More Like Honeybees. I want to read the subtitle as well. It is Reject Consumerism, Embrace Ministry, Change How the World Does Youth Ministry. Practical stuff, guys. Throw something at us as we end. Did I miss something?
Yeah, you said embrace ministry. It's embrace maturity.
Oh, embrace maturity. I just have an aversion to that word for some reason. I don't know what it is that I was. Embrace. Thanks for pointing it out, Dave. Reject consumerism, embrace maturity, change how the world does ministry. I'll focus my time after this on that second phrase. I need to work on that. So, embrace maturity. That's funny. All right, practical stuff. Throw it at us.
Well, first of all, the metaphor.
Yeah.
We wanted a metaphor that people could grab a hold of. And people have been talking about some of the concepts in this book for some time, but you need to package things in a way that people can grab a hold of and just remember, easily remember. And this is one. And we have youth workers that are reaching out to us, and they're like, "Hey, once a month, they're calling out to the students and saying, 'Are you being like a hippo or like a honeybee?'" Because people can grab a hold of the
whole
continuum.
Concept,
yeah. And so first of all, practical. It's understand what this metaphor means, and that's the first section of the book. There's 2 sections in this book. And the first section is just unpacking the metaphor. Yeah. And there's 6 short chapters on that. Each one of them has questions at the end, so they're great to use with a youth worker team. It'd be great to take even a church leadership team through if you're trying to help the whole church make a shift in terms of how you approach young people, or even taking a parents group through it. It could work in all kinds of settings with that. Just helping them understand the metaphor and the different aspects of it. The second section of the book is where we really get uber practical in that, because we want to help people know, all right, well, how do we actually implement this? And so it begins with talking about how we invest our lives in young people. And yeah, you can have any kind of framework of how to reach young people, how to work with them, any kind of system or strategy. And if you don't have relationships that are built along the way in that investment of time and life, the strategies aren't going to work. So we unpack that in chapter 7. And then the next 3 chapters, I go through this process of trying to help people understand, what does it look like to actually set up a young person to make an impact in and through their life? Now, we have to be careful as we say that, because impact has almost become its own. Well, like, we could do a podcast just on this. This idolatry of impact. It's like we
celebrity influencer.
Yeah. So it's like we worship the impact. And so that is not what we're trying to say here, but we're trying to take youth deep in Christ so that way they can then engage their faith. And chapters 8, 9, and 10 get after that. Chapter 8, champion. And then the next chapter, empower. And then the third chapter, in that sequence, is motivate. So I want to take you. I'm sitting with a group of global leaders in Cairo, Egypt, and we're there for a conference. Just 25 of us, and our goal was the development of this thing called the Next Gen Global Leaders Collab. And it's so we can see the gospel advanced by eliminating duplication in our ministries, and it's a great group of people, godly people, really appreciate them so much. But I almost lost the will to live because we were having this segment where we were wordsmithing what we were going to be doing from a vision standpoint and whatnot. And the group got so hung up on this idea of empower. And I realized in this group, everyone believed that they wanted young people to be empowered, but there was no agreement on what that meant. Mm. And you see organizations throw this word around all the time without an understanding of, well, how do we actually do that? And so what we do in the second half of this book is we actually break that down in a way that it can be understood and it can be carried out, and it helps people recognize. So we use a Venn diagram, and that's where there's 3 circles, they come together, and where they overlap in the center, that's where you see impact. But it's understanding what it means to be a champion for a young person. Understand what it truly means to empower a young person, and then understanding how it is that one motivates a young person. All 3 of those are essential. And most of us as youth workers will recognize that we excel at 1 or 2 of those 3 circles, and we'll have a third one that we maybe don't touch on at all. And we don't intentionally leave it out. We're just not wired that way to do as much with that. And just having our eyes open to that sets us up to go, oh, wow, that's not that hard. I can just do a little investment of X, Y, and Z, and I can help these young people be set up for success being godly success, taking them deeper so that they can engage their faith.
Yeah, so I'm looking here at Appendix A, 45 creative ways to champion, empower, and motivate youth. Yeah. And as you were talking about, I think it was when you were talking about empower, let's go back. Let me make sure I heard you right. Did you say, everybody wants to be empowered, or how did you say that? Was it?
All these leaders, they want their organizations to be set up so that they can empower young people.
Yeah.
But there is an agreement on what that word actually means.
Was before you hit that, and this is where I'm just sorry because I'm listening and there's so much you're throwing at me right now that it's good. And I don't have the benefit of the tape to listen back, but you were saying all kids want to be, what was it that he was saying to that? Was I hearing that right? And that's when I said celebrity influencer. Oh, influencers, right? Did you say influencers or impact? They wanted impact. That's it. Thank you, Chris. And you passed the test for listening. That's good. I flunked. Again, too much for me. I was so good. Impact, right? So here's the thing with kids that I think about culturally. Yes, but they want to. I think many kids have been nurtured in a consumeristic world to have impact because they want to be the impactor that everybody looks at, rather than humbling, stepping aside and like Christ, serving Christ, and having an impact where the capital that I'm looking for is not the likes or, people going, oh, I loved your picture on Instagram of making it, the virtue signaling. They call that, performative allyship is a phrase that's used for that, where you're performing to do this, but it's not out of that heart that's bent towards Christ. And that's what I like. I kind of paused on that. And was trying to remember that, but that was good. That was good.
Well, we don't want to put impact on the altar.
Yeah.
Right.
Idolatry.
And so we can be at risk of doing that, and so that's not what we're advocating for.
Yeah.
But we do, as we take youth deeper, we want to set them loose. Trying to take the steps to implement this, whether it's in our youth ministries at our churches or whether it's in our homes or guiding our parents to do this in their homes, that can be a challenging journey.
Yeah.
It's an essential one. And we need this transition, which is why the subtitle of the book talks about change how the world does youth ministry. Because we need to have a shift. And that's actually, I mentioned the 2 sections of this book. I wrote it in 3 sections. And the 3rd section, the editor-publisher that we use, which is Fernling Creative, and they are incredibly gifted and so talented, and I'm so thankful for Amy Lynch and her team. But they came back to me and they're like, Dave, these 2 sections are solid and focused. Your 3rd section is solid and focused. But if you put them all together, it's foggy. And so with their advice, and I believe it was the right advice, we published this book so that it would be on point.
Yeah. And
give that foundation of the metaphor and then give the practical. The 3rd section is actually being published as a devotional companion, and that comes out February 3rd.
Okay.
And the concept with that is we want to encourage the heart of anyone that's doing it. It's called the Beekeeper's Devotional. Now, some people will go, oh, well, that's just for people that wear those funky masks and all that kind of stuff. But if you read the first book, you'll recognize the metaphor that we're explaining there. And that just has 15 stories that I tell that connect with word pictures. And then I take a passage of Scripture and I go deep to make it connect with that. Yeah. So some people will pick this up for encouragement. Some people will pick it up because it would literally give you the start for 15 sermons or that you wanted to give in a row if you wanted.
Yeah.
But it's written to encourage the heart.
Yeah. And I like that you use the word journey as we talk about, how the changing how the world does youth ministry, because it's one step at a time. And I was reading, and we have a group online that does going through Alistair Begg's Truth for Life, Volume 2. And today he was looking at, the fact that our goal in life is not to be perfect. A lot of us as Christians believe we have to be perfect or God will not accept us, but that God wants to see us stepping towards, moving in the direction of the image of Christ and obedience and the process of sanctification. And that's a lifelong journey, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing here. And we've done so many things that were so embedded in our youth ministry world that, again, like you said earlier, we've done it. This is the right way to do it, right? Kids are coming. Well, what's happening afterwards? And I like what you've done here. Just out of curiosity, when did this metaphor come to you? How did that happen? Were you asleep in the shower?
So a number of years ago, I'd come up with half of the metaphor, and I actually taught a workshop, and it was right over here at Elizabethtown College. They were doing some youth men thing, and they asked me to come in, and at that point, the metaphor was half baked. The content was solid, but the metaphor wasn't.
What was it? Were you talking about hippos or honeybees?
Well, at that point, I had the hippos. I had the hippos from the very beginning. I was like, we need to treat young people less like hippos, and then I was like, more like the Hoover Dam.
Hoover Dam, yeah.
And so the concept with the Hoover Dam was that, and I had all these stats and everything about how much power it generates if you if you channel the water properly, and the metaphor, as I explained it, it made sense.
Yeah.
But it wasn't captivating. And it was when Josh,
I sat down with a young lady. I think she was 18 or 19 at that time, and she'd been involved in some of the summer programming that Christian Endeavor did, and we were just wrestling with this. And she's like, "We need to make this clear and captivating." And so it was her insight as a teenager. She's like, we need to switch that from Hoover Dam to Honeybees.
Yeah.
And, little cherubs began singing in the coffee shop in that moment. I mean, it was just such a spark of like clarity and inspiration.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And she actually wrote the foreword to the book.
Okay.
Because the editor-publisher, they were like, oh, yeah, you should find somebody that's as well-connected as you possibly can. And I said, if I did that, the book wouldn't have integrity. Yeah. I said, so it might not sell as many copies, but I want Callie Sensenig to write the foreword to the book, because she spoke into this metaphor, but she also felt like everything that is in this book was something that she gained through her connection in Christian Endeavor and through some of the time that the Lord's allowed me to invest with her over time. And so that felt like it had more integrity.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm so glad you guys came in. Just as we finish up, either one of you, how can folks learn more? Where are we going?
Yeah, so they can go out to christianendeavor.com, and they can also go to ceworks.faith. Those are the two websites. And we're actually in the process of consolidating all of that, which is something that would covet your prayers for. But
that's not easy.
No, it's not. But
we've done it here. Man, it's tough.
Yeah, but Christian Endeavor is an old organization, and we're taking some intentional steps to bring some different parts of it all under one umbrella. But that ceworks.faith one is where you can find most of the CE-based material for the United States context. So that's helpful. You can find the book on Amazon. So we have it for sale in 4 different formats actually, and that's so there's the ebook and the physical book both in English and Spanish, and so that's available out there, and you can find me at davecoryell.com. And so if you don't know how to spell the last name, then go to the Christian Endeavor website and you can find it. But I'm out there. And
Coryell.
That's right.
Yeah.
You got it. Yell is in my name, but I don't yell a lot. Yeah. So that's good.
You are so kind. I can poke Josh. You know, you're kind of hard to poke because you just smile back. It's like, yeah, I love that. You know, being able to, in good fun. And I should mention as we sign off, and thank you for sharing that. You know, and Chris will include all those, as I said earlier, beneath the player for this particular podcast at cpyu.org. Dave was in the midst of writing this book. When was that? When was that?
Great. Yeah.
When was that?
Yeah, that was fall of last year.
Okay,
because I was on a sabbatical to take some time to write this book.
And I do one of my monthly trips. It used to be more often, but I got to stop buying books. But I do a monthly trip down to Barnes and Noble. I'm always looking through all the new books, Barnes and Noble and Lancaster, and it's right next to the cafe, the Starbucks and stuff. And every now and then I'll just look to see who do I know in there. And I don't know if I noticed you or you noticed me.
No, you were looking at things, and then all of a sudden you heard this voice as if God was speaking. Should you be looking at those books?
Now, wait a minute. I think I was in the Christianity and religion section. But Dave and I spin around, and there's Dave right behind me, and so we had a great conversation. You were in the midst of writing. You were actually sitting at Barnes & Noble trying to get some inspiration in writing.
Yep.
And so now I fully expect to be down there doing Christmas shopping, and instead of seeing you sitting there, sneaking copies of the book on the shelves.
That's the next step.
Yeah, that's the next step. So going undercover in there. But hey, thanks guys for being on here. This is great. Josh Good, Dave Coryell, again, go to the website, get the book. This has been really, really helpful, and it's been fun for me, helpful for me to hear about this, and it's one we're certainly going to recommend. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Walt.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
All right. So, everybody, I'm not sure if we're going to pop another episode out before Christmas. If not, and this is the last one before Christmas, we hope you have a blessed Christmas. Focus on the correct things, not the consumerism. That's always important, and it's always a struggle for us, those of us who grow up here in North America, so blessed in so many ways. But we hope you have a blessed Christmas, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Youth Culture Matters.
Thanks for joining us for Youth Culture Matters, a podcast from the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding. If you'd like to learn more about today's youth culture, visit our website at cpyu.org. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, email us at podcast@cpyu.org.